Send me the link also, so I can just open it from here.
Yeah, here. I'm not sure why it's from. Yeah, we are live.
Yeah, I got it. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to another session of special sessions for different subjects. We have with us today Ms Zufashan Hasan, who has been teaching law for many years. She has quite a lot of experience, and she has helped many students achieve their dreams by scoring well in the subject and also becoming a better lawyers in the process, I guess. So today our session will be on A levels and AS level law. So let's hear it from Ms. Zufashan.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, guys. Hope you're all doing well. I'm just gonna kind of go over the basic structure of the examination, as well as what you need to know about acing the examination P1 and P2 for the AS level law exam. So I'll start with the basics of the basics, right? So if you just look at the screen ahead, you will see at the basic level, what is required in the examination from you. So what to expect from the P1 and the P2 papers, right? So the syllabus code is right there, 9084, the GCE. And what you look at over here is, even if you're a student who's beginning the course from scratch, remember that reading is something that you have to get used to. Pick up any textbook. I'm sure you guys have at least one that you use, right? So Jacqueline Martin, the English legal system, is one of the main books to be used for this course. You can also, by the way, use Elliott and Quinn, which looks like this, actually, the English legal system, this book, Elliott and Quinn, or you could use the one that is on the screen right now. This one is a bit more complicated. It's a bit more complex book. And I'll tell you what I mean when I say complex book, right? So Jacqueline Martin is a simpler book to use. I would say stick with that. But remember that you have to also be okay with the content of the syllabus first, which I'll get to in about a few minutes, right? Terminology that you expect is something that most kids have an issue with. So I'll begin from here. Now, when I show you an exam question for a P1 later on, once we go over the paper pattern, then you will know words like critical analysis, discussion, assessment, explain, describe, and what they really mean for the exam. So you have to understand that any examination is answering the question that is given to you in the exam, not what you want to interpret the chapter to be like. Most kids look at the whole question, they say, you know what, this topic is this, so I'll just write whatever I know about the whole topic. That's not going to really help you achieve the mark in the exam for that question, right? So A levels is difficult. We all know that. You guys are experiencing it right now firsthand because you're prepping for the final exam. But remember, the more clear your concepts are, the better you'll be able to answer the exam question, because the examiner picks up one part of the chapter and presents it in a format to you, right? You gotta be able to look at it and decode what the examiner means by that. So your concepts must be crystal clear in terms of answering the exam question eventually. So I'll get to this part, these 3 points eventually in like a later point in this session. Now let's quickly go over the syllabus first, right? Your AS syllabus is just one thing, that is the English legal system, all right? All 18 chapters are from this particular idea. That's one simple thing. When we say legal system, we mean the procedures of law, criminal, civil. We mean the personnel involved inside that system, the judiciary, the magistrates, the lawyers, right? How are they trained? How are they qualified to become doing their job, and so on. Now I want to go over, guys, from a very purely examination perspective, what the CIE's objectives are in this examination. This is important because you will see a lot of this coming up in your exam questions, right? So knowledge understanding is what we spoke about. This makes up 50% of your actual grade in the course, right? How you can recall, use information, develop your knowledge, understand the principles. Most kids kind of gloss over this part by looking at sample answers, which is a good way to assess what an essay should look like, but not every question is the same. So I would strongly advise you guys against using sample rote learned answers for each kind of fitting a question, right? Then you have the second one, which is analysis, evaluation, and application. So by analysis and evaluation, we mean a very simple thing, which is, for example, if you look at this pencil, right? Like this object, let's say, let's not label it a pencil. Describing it would be its dimensions, its color, its shape, right? What it can do, just purely functional. But then an analysis would be, let's say I ask you, analyze the use of this particular object as opposed to a crayon for writing. To analyze it, to evaluate it, what you'll have to do over here is kind of compare this to other things that you can use for the same thing, right? Or give the pros and cons of this particular item as opposed to other things that you can use for the same purpose. So evaluation is a very detailed insight into a commentary on the good and the bad, right? On the weaknesses and the strengths of something. In this case, in different chapters, which we'll get to when we look at the topics, how will you speak to the examiner about the strength and weaknesses of a particular topic or idea or concept as opposed to something else. And obviously, communication presentation, you have to use formal language. You have to use logical, coherent arguments. You cannot use informal terminology to answer a legal examination. So you cannot use colloquial language. You have to use things like defendant or claimant or legal system, or things such as damages, compensation, remedies, and so on. So very clearly, very simply, this does not mean that you use flowery language. You're not supposed to know complicated and complex English terms. All you got to do is present your argument in a very clear, concise, so short manner. So there's another myth to be busted over here. The more you write, the more marks you will get. That's not really true. The more you write, that's not the more marks you'll get, because what you're writing should answer the question that is given to you, right? So let's put a pin in this and we'll come back to answering questions. I'll give you an example of, a topic and we'll go over that very briefly. This is for P1 and P2 both. I'll now go over the weightage of the papers, and then I'll go over the different types of examination points for P1 and P2, that is for your AS, P3, P4R, and A2 examination section, right? So P1, guys, is 1 hour, 30 minutes, same as P2. Now, P1 is a purely essay-based examination. You get 6 questions. This on the screen right here. You get 6 questions, and you got to answer 3 from that choice. Now, most kids will look at this and they'll be like, this is great. I'll just prepare 8 topics out of 18 given to me in the syllabus. That's a bad idea, because we do not know the examiner, and we don't know from which, unit they'll give what question. So it is also a myth when teachers tell you and people tell you that unit 1 and 2 or something only comes in P1 and 3 comes in P2. Any unit can come in any paper, guys. Any topic, any chapter can come in any paper. So it's not really a smart, choice to do selective study. If you really want to skip something, I would say skip one isolated chapter, right? So in that way, you cannot skip criminal system or the civil system, because that comes in together with their chapters. Like, it kind of connects together in terms of evaluation. I'll get to it in a little bit, right? So the first paper, 3 questions out of 6, right? These 6 can come from anywhere in the syllabus. And then in P2, a very different story presents itself. So in P2, we have data response, more like a comprehension. They give you a fictional situation with real live, legal rules. They give you cases, regulations, or they can even give you a statute, right? So looking at the actual legal material, it's called the source material in the exam. And I will show you a paper to this extent. The source material is to be used only to answer the questions given to you in a P2 paper. You cannot use your syllabus knowledge for parts A, B, and C, that are the 10-mark questions. Paper total is 50 marks in P2. So A, B, and C are 10-mark questions based on the situation given to you in the exam, which must be solved by using the source material that is given to you in the paper itself. So you're given the question, the situation, and the material at the bottom. You got to use the material and give legal advice to the parties or the situation that is asked of you in the actual 10-mark questions. The last question, part D, right, or part 4 in P2, is an essay-based question, but is similar to a P1 essay. So to recap, remember that P1 is 3 questions out of 6. It could be from anywhere in the whole syllabus. Then in P2, you have 4 parts. You have a 10-mark question, a 10-mark question, a 10-mark question, and then a 20-mark essay in the end, right? The 20-mark essay is similar to a P1 25-mark essay. So all 3 essays over here are 25 marks each. So making it a total of 75 marks for P1, 50 marks for P2, and P1 holds the highest weightage for you in your AS exam, that is 60% of your grade as opposed to 40% in your P2, right? So just looking at this, remember that you will in total, combining P1 and P2 together, right? You will get about 4 essays to solve, 3 in P1 and 1 in P2. The essays are similar, taken from your syllabus knowledge, but these 10-mark questions are always going to be unseen. You can never predict what the examiner can give you as a situation in the exam, all right? So don't ever go ahead to predict the situation. It will always be unseen. The examiner wants to test how well you can read a new law, right? A source material in the exam with a new situation given to you, and how well can you attach the situation with the scenario and solve it like a comprehension, basically, right? That's what they're testing you, your application. That's the main thing in P2, and assessment and explanation is the main thing in P1. I hope that's clear to everyone who's watching. If there are any questions, you can kind of like put in the chat option on YouTube, and I will kind of get back to you on it. If there's any specific questions about the paper structure, happy to help you guys. And now we'll go over the syllabus, and then we'll go over some examples from P1 and P2, so you have some clarity on what it means to explain, to evaluate, and also to apply the knowledge in a P2 exam, all right? P3, P4, we can go over later time. The course outline is very simple. There are 3 units, as we call them, 1, 2, and 3. Sources of law, machinery of justice, and legal personnel. Any of these topics can come in P1 as an essay question, or P2 as the part 4 essay question, right? This one is purely a topical background for law, right? The syllabus starts from here onwards, all right? So common law and equity, precedent, legislation, primary, delegated legislation, statutory interpretation, human rights, law reform, civil courts, ADR always kind of goes together with tribunals, not mentioned over here, but we will add tribunals over here. And these 3 topics must never be skipped, guys. This one, and this one, because in an essay question, they kind of come together. For example, if a question is asking you about the civil courts and how the courts operate, high court, county court, and so on, and then they ask you, are the courts a more effective method or not? But effective compared to what? Compared to tribunals and compared to other methods of solving and resolving disputes. So you got to understand that the evaluation, the comparison will come from the other 2 parts, this one and this one, right? So these 3 should be done together. Don't skip tribunals if you're doing civil courts and ADR, and if you're doing the other 2, don't skip that one, basically. Same thing happens in the criminal process and criminal courts, right? The right opposite of civil court. They're 2 separate things. One is public, one is private. Criminal courts and criminal process has a 3-part thing happening to it inside, in terms of the questions in the essay examination point of view. This got pre-trial, what happens basically leading up to a criminal trial, then the actual trial process, right? In 2 main criminal courts, magistrates court and crown courts, what really takes place inside the trial process where the defendant pleads guilty or pleads not guilty. And once the trial is over, a verdict is given if the defendant pled, not guilty. Then how can each party, prosecution and defense, appeal against those decisions to the higher courts? So in the actual exam, a question can come on any one part. They can maybe examine you just on pretrial, or they can examine you on just trial or just appeals, or they can examine you on any two, right? Or all three of them, depending on what the question is phrased like. So when you read the question, read it very carefully to understand if it's a question on pretrial or just trial or only appeals, or is it all two parts or all three parts, basically. Sentencing is a separate standalone question on its own. So is the legal profession, judiciary, CPS, lay personnel being magistrates. So the examination kind of phrases it a bit differently. Magistrates are lay persons, the common person who are not legally qualified, but they do hear and give decisions in the magistrates' courts. That's a different question altogether. The Lord Chancellor, not really examined on its own as such, but it's good to do it as a background chapter. So that is your course outline, right? We will now quickly go over some examples of examination questions for P1 and also then for P2. So the way P1 is examined, I'm going to show you, let's talk about any one topic. Let's speak about civil courts because we're talking about that initially as well. I'm going to pick on the civil courts chapter and we can then just go over the questions. I'll show you the examples of what I mean by explanation versus evaluation, right? So scrolling, these are all files that I've made on topical past papers. So going down to, let's talk about ADR, right? So ADR is alternative dispute resolution methods, alternative to the court system. So you either go to court with an issue or you approach some other neutral third party, like a conciliator, a mediator, or an arbitrator, right? To resolve your dispute with the other party that you are facing the dispute with. This only happens in the civil courts and the civil area, which is private issues with you, where you personally bring up a problem with somebody else, like nuisance, let's say, like a contractual breach, like let's say something happening in a company, unlawful termination, human rights, civil actions. All these are civil cases where a person can approach ADR first and then go to court next. Remember, in the UK, they made it compulsory to approach ADR methods and then go to court as per the Civil Procedure Rules. That's an Act of Parliament made in 1998. So looking at a question over here, you may get a situational question. They may talk about a person like Preeti over here, let's say, has been racially discriminated and what can she do now, right? Like how can she go to a tribunal? That's the explanation part, right? Here is where the evaluation starts. In the explanation, you'll talk about how can this person X, right? In this case, Preeti, how can she take her case to an employment tribunal? So over here, you will explain the workings of the employment tribunal, right? And appeal tribunal. You explain the whole process for this person. Once you explain that, the evaluation starts over here when they ask you, how is this different? When they say this, they mean the tribunal system. And how is that different from going to court? So you see what I meant initially when I said you cannot skip the civil courts chapter when you're doing ADR, because over here you will compare tribunals to taking the case to court. What is better or worse about a court as opposed to a tribunal in terms of cost, speed, stress, privacy, resolution, the guarantee of being legally binding as a decision? So all those things are very important to be considered. That is your evaluation in the exam, right? So you will use the content in the book that you've learned and that you've understood and you've grasped, and you will use that to answer a question like this. So the answer can be very short, right? 2.5 pages, 2.5 sides, right? But it can also be longer, but has to be relevant to the question given to you in the exam. Remember, in any situational question, you must relate the topic back to the person mentioned in your examination question. If you only tell the examiner a whole memorized answer on only tribunals, and then some things about the court, you will not get them any marks, right? So in a question like this, or in any question, for example, out of 25 marks, half marks go for explanation of what a tribunal is, how they function, what is the law over here, and half marks go for evaluation, the discussion, the pros and cons, the strength, the weaknesses, the comparison of things to each other. So you get half marks for each part. So if you only do one, right, you won't get the appropriate marks for that particular answer. All right. A simpler question can maybe look like this one. 2014, variant 2, summer examination. Describe the various methods of ADR. A very simple describe and explain situation. Over here, you will give the examiner all 4 kinds of ADR, from negotiation, that is a very informal way of talking to the other party, bringing up a concern and resolving the problem, to mediation, which can range from being very, very informal to something like a mini trial, to conciliation, which is an even more formal way of resolving disputes outside the courtroom. And finally, the most formal of them all, which is arbitration, right? So you will explain using the law given to you in the textbook and that you've learned in your coursework, explain each of these 4 things. And then they ask you to evaluate and assess something. They're saying, assess whether ADR provides a better way or not. For who? For any individual or party to resolve a civil dispute than using the court system. So they are specifically asking you to compare ADR methods to the court system and to say which one is better or worse. Now remember, guys, over here you have to give both parts of the story. You have to give the positive as well as the negative. And if you can draw conclusions, you should, but always give both sides, because you're asked to assess how far are ADR methods better or worse than the court system. In some points, they're better. In some parts, they're not that great. So I would say go thematically over here. Use themes such as cost, along with speed, along with privacy, and so on, to compare ADR to the court system and give conclusions somewhere about which one is better or worse. And you will find that the same pattern repeats in every chapter for every topic. So the topics will change, right? The content will change, but the way the examiner is going to assess you in the paper will roughly format-wise remain the same. If you look at some other topic, let's pick up a random one like the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. In there, you will see the same thing happening again. Explain and assess. So look at the question that's given to you over here. Let's look at a recent one, 2021, actually last year. Describe the function of the CPS. So wherever the examination question is being specific as to what they are looking at, you have to tell the examiner what they're asking for. Over here, they're asking for the function, the work, the role of CPS. This does not mean that you will not give the composition of CPS. You will give the background. You'll give the, the reasons why the CPS was made, and you will also give what it is composed of, the personnel in there. But you will limit it to just the background information to give perspective. The main focus will always be on what they're asking you in the question, or where they're asking you about the work, the role, the function of the Crown Prosecution Service, right? Once you finish with that, then they're asking you to tell them the extent to which, discuss the extent to which the CPS has been successful in its role, basically, in its function. So has it been successful? Yes, in many parts it has, but also has not been that successful. So you will have to, again, give both points of view. So this pattern will form in almost, and usually in every topic that you have been asked to read for the syllabus. All right. So that is the P1 essay questions, and the 4th part of your P2, that is your syllabus essay, right? Similar to a P1 essay. All right. So if you want more information about particular topics and particular problems with, the content and the cases, the legal rules, understanding of them. I'm happy to go over that with you at a later time in more detail, but right now we're only going to speak about the structure and the overall description of both papers. I'm now going to go over a P2 examination topic, guys. So I'm going to show you a P2 paper, and we'll go over what that looks like. So in any P2 paper, guys, looking at any one of them, let's just open a random paper like this one. So it's not something that is the paper. Let me just look at the actual paper for you guys. Let's open a recent one from last year, just so we can go over the way it looks in the paper. Also, guys, don't ever forget to read the instruction given to you in the paper, how many questions you must answer. And they tell you very, very carefully and each time to use the material given in the paper itself to answer the 10-mark questions. All right. So in this situation, they've given you a random situation with Archie, Gina, and Imran, A, B, and C. These can be labeled as 1, 2, and 3, or in any other label. Don't forget, then don't get confused. That will always, however, be a 10-mark question. The first 3 at least will be 10 markers, right? And these have to be answered by making reference to the material given to you at the bottom of the question, right? These are all actual, real, very relevant and very to the point and actual laws in the UK. Now, the examiner may give you, let's say, an act of parliament, like the Laser Misuse Vehicles Act 2018, or they may give you, let's say, in the next question, you might see over here a case or two given to you. But in this paper, they haven't given you any cases. They've given you for both the questions. They've given you acts of parliament. All right. Now, in a different paper, they may give you regulations that may be labeled differently. It also can be just cases. So make sure you see what the examiner is giving you. Now, many kids will look at a P2 question paper and they will say, you know what, it's very difficult. How can I possibly read the situation and also read the law given to me? And this looks very, complicated, but always remember to take a deep breath, all right, and break up the material in parts. Remember to look at the commas, the ands, the dashes, the ifs, right? All these are guiding you towards breaking it up in different parts. So for example, we begin to read section 1 of the Laser Misuse Act. So with me, let us read section 1, subsection 1 of this particular Act of Parliament. The offenses given to you in the heading: offense of shining or directing a laser beam towards a vehicle. This could be anything. They've chosen to give you the situation. Now remember, as a legal advisor, you are not to give your personal opinion on what you think has happened to Archie, Gina, and Imran. All you got to do is forget about what you personally feel about the situation. The examiner will not care about what you think is happening over here. It is morally wrong to shine a laser beam or to go to somebody's house. You will not get marks for giving your personal opinion. They're clearly telling you to explain how the act given to you will apply in this situation. All right? That is all you got to do. No evaluation, no assessment, only an explanation of which parts of this law apply to, let's say, Gina, and so on, right? So let's read the first part only so you have an idea about how to read statutes, right? A person commits an offense if, now this if has to go separately towards this part A, and then you will use the same thing if, and then you will read from part B. So the way you read it is like this. A person commits an offense if the person shines or directs a laser beam towards a vehicle which is moving or ready to move. So stop here. All right. Don't move on. Stop here and see if this part applies to your situation above. So if you scroll back up and use this one part for this situation, Archie plans to kidnap a famous celebrity who lives in a house near London. On 1st August of so-and-so year, he hides in the bushes opposite the house. He shines a laser beam at a car as it leaves the house. This is relevant because we use this one sentence. And then we look at the law. The law says a person commits an offense, this offense, if they shine or direct a laser beam towards a vehicle. So using that one factual scenario of Archie, we can see that he has committed the offense, right? So far, that because we know he has shined the laser beam on the vehicle. That's it. That's the entire answer. You only got to stop here. You're not supposed to say how wrong this was, right? And Archie, this is so unfair for the driver. It could have killed him. That's not relevant. Your offense is of shining the laser beam or directing it at a vehicle. That's it. You will stick this and you will end the discussion over there. So you will quote the law, right? Section 1, subsection 1, subsection A says this. But remember, it's an and condition. So both parts must be fulfilled for it to be an offense. All right. So part B says, and the laser dazzles or distracts or is likely to dazzle or distract a person who is in control of the vehicle. Let's go back up and see. This is happening over here or not. The driver is dazzled and the car crashes in the wall. So looking at that second sentence over here, marked in yellow, you will then attach that to your law and you will say, in this situation, Archie clearly has committed the offense of shining or directing a laser beam towards a vehicle. Why? Because part A has happened, B also has happened. So in the exam for P2, you get marks again for explaining the law. The law is a two-part law, part A of part 1 of part 1. Basically, you will quote this in short like this. Section 1, subsection 1, the brackets mean subsection, and subsection A says so-and-so thing is a crime or an offense, right? Separate A and B from each other, separately explain the law, apply it like we did using the scenario above. We saw what Archie did. Use that like an obvious thing. You have to quote the obvious thing. For example, Archie hid in the bushes and shines a laser beam at the car. Henceforth, section 1, subsection A has been fulfilled. And because the driver is dazzled and crashes into the wall, this also fulfills section 1, subsection B. All right. So the application after the explanation is the next half of your marks. So to recap, in these questions, you get half the marks out of 10 for explaining the law to the examiner. Here is what the law says. I'm going to apply these many laws to this particular scenario. Individually explain them and apply them to the scenario. That's the full mark plus the conclusion with the application and concluding that Archie has committed the offense under section 1, basically. That is going to give you the best marks for any P2 paper. All right, so that is, in short, just one part of the, answering of a P2 paper. Again, remember, you will only use the law given over here for answering these questions. So you will work your way ahead for the defenses, and then all of these things you will read, and then you will see which parts apply to which parts, and you will then answer the section, the questions, basically. Remember, you don't have to apply all the law to the whole thing. For example, section 2 will not apply to the first question because it says to do with traffic services in the air. This is not applicable to Archie because he is to do with a car, right? But in the next question, it's to do with an aircraft. Over here, you will apply the relevant law. So please read the question very carefully and apply only the relevant law to the scenario to answer it. All right, and fully develop it, explain it, and apply and conclude each part like that. So remember, each question will be different. In the paper, it's supposed to only solve one question. For example, in this, you've been given 2 questions about, one was the Archie thing, one is the Richard, Julia, and Ralph question. You either answer question number 2, all 4 parts, A, B, C, D, or you answer question number 1, all 4 parts, A, B, C, D. You make a choice. You answer either 1 or 2. Each one has 4 parts to it, making a total of a 50-mark paper for P2. Now, talking very briefly about the time management. Your time management will become better the more you practice exam questions. So a suggested outline or a suggested way of doing P1, let's say, I would say for P1, apportion your time 1 hour, 30 minutes in 30 minutes slots. So for example, you will give 30 minutes to the first essay question, and then 30 minutes to the next one, and 30 for the next one. So in short, you will give each essay question out of the 6 you have, 3 you will choose. You can choose any one you want, all right? The one that you're more comfortable with, your strengths, right? And you will answer them in this way. Remember, one more thing that students don't really look at is labeling the question correctly. You can't be answering question number 2 and labeling it question number 3. You will not get any marks. You have to pick your questions and kind of label them correctly. Let's say I'm answering question 6 and 2 and 3. I have to correctly label my questions in my sheet, label the answer correctly. All right. Then we have P2. So in P2, I would suggest that you guys do it a bit differently. P2 again is the same time. It is still 1 hour, 30 minutes, but this time you have 4 questions and one is a 20-mark essay question. So I would say for P2, apportion your time in this particular way. For example, that you can give 20 minutes each, all right, to the A, B, and C parts. Now, some students who are really good at practicing and doing the A, B, and C parts can kind of give it less time if they want to, right? These are the 10-mark questions, guys. A, B, and C, give 20 minutes each. So you can give, again, 30 minutes to your part D essay question and give it enough time because that is similar to a P1 essay question, right? It's not, so the last part D essay question will always be from the syllabus. So just to show you what this means, let's look at part D over here. The part D essay question, 20 marks, over here is about magistrates, laypersons. Describe how they are selected and trained. So more focus on selection and training and less focus on appointment. Less focus on their role, right? It's appointment and training and how they're trained. So you will still mention their job very briefly, but you will focus the most on appointment, training, and selection. And then they ask you to assess the extent to which selection and training has improved or not, their ability to do their job, right? So are they being given the tools to do a good job or a bad job? That's the assessment, the pros and cons, the good and bad. So over here in this question, if you give a general, strength and weakness of magistrates, you will not get enough marks. You have to talk about how the training and selection is good or bad. Is it efficient? Is it great enough to allow them to do their job properly or not? So you have to give both sides of the story. But you will, from the whole chapter, pick out details about these 2 things from your memory, and you will then tell the examiner that this is how it is, right? So this is similar to a P1 paper question, basically. The same thing in the next question. If you were to choose the second question to do, you will have to do an essay on equity. Describe the remedies available in equity. That's the description part. Break it up into 2 different parts. The essay question, explain, and assess. They're asking you then to assess the extent to which they lead to fairness in the law. So it's equity and the idea being a part of the legal system, fair or not. So the extent to which it is fair and when it will stop becoming fair. So again, you will give both sides of the story for equity as well, but for the remedies of equity being fair or unfair, right? So remember one more time that the part D question is similar to a P1 essay. Parts A, B, and C are to be answered by using the material given to you in the paper itself, like a comprehension. And that is how you kind of ace a P2 exam. Remember, the practice is key to be able to finish the paper perfectly in the limited time given to you. That's the exam, right? So you have to practice. I would say pick up past paper questions from the past years. Begin with the most recent one, 2021, 2020, 19, work your way backwards. Solve past papers to see how and where you stand. It's very important because the main area where the kids don't do so well is the time management and the time restriction. All right. And also, second part was about what are you answering the question with? Like, what are you writing? Please, please do not write an all I know answer. Never ever look at an essay question and say, oh, it's on equity. I'll write whatever I know about the topic. You have to answer the question given to you in the exam. All right. I hope this helped, guys. If you need any other kind of assistance, you're feel free to get in touch with me on my own channel, or through this whole situation, we can kind of get to some kind of an explanation about specific topics and how to go over specific things and more examination tips if you guys would require anything like that. So good luck, guys, and I hope to kind of, see you at some point. Good luck for the paper and your prep.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure
You're welcome,
students
Ahmed.
really found it very useful.
Yeah, and whoever couldn't make it can probably watch the recorded version, and they can kind of,
I'll share the link with you.
see how that goes. All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
All
Thank you so
right. Take
much.
care. Bye-bye.
Yes.